talking to myself again. But it's the only way.
Hi and welcome along to NUFC Matters. It's another Dream Team special, episode number 3 with Martin Nesbitt. How are you, Martin?
I'm very good, mate. Thanks very much.
Yeah, great to have you on, mate. And this has proven to be one of my most enjoyable shows to record, because just hearing people's memories of different players, but seeing people's different teams and different formations, and just some of the recollections we've had about some of the players on the first couple of episodes with Daz and with Mitch. So looking forward to hearing yours. Who's your goalkeeper, Martin?
Goalkeeper, so many choices, but for me it was the goalkeeper that I've seen the most of. So for me, I went with Shearer. Obviously, the Irish connection there as well. For me, he was... obviously, we got him... we got him on the cheap. Obviously, he'd been out on loan to the Mackhams from Blackburn, and then we poached him and brought him in. But 354 games, I think he was one of the players that was just a rock. He was a great international. He was a great service pro to Newcastle as a club. And I think for any player now to get that amount of games and kind of get to 10 years in, I think is a remarkable thing. And I think, it really shows when players honoured contracts and it wasn't necessarily all about the money. Some fantastic games. But he just really stood out to me as what a goalkeeper was all about. He was commanding, good shot stopper. He was, not so great with the penalties all the times, but when you needed him, I think when he was at the back of our four, you felt safe, even if the defense was a little bit of a squeaky bum. It was kind of like you knew you had given between the sticks. So for me, he was my goalkeeper of my team.
Great choice, and I'm sure there's a lot of people will choose Shea given as their number one, and no surprise there. So let's go to right back of your defence.
Yeah, I went. Now, anybody that wants to shout at me because I got defenders mixed up, that's grand. But I went with John Anderson, and again I went with kind of the Irish. I know there is an Irish link. I did a few bits. We got him on a free from Preston. He wasn't a prolific goal scorer, but 337 games. He was one of the first players. My first game was 1986, 7th of May. We played Luton Town at home. It was a 2-2 draw. Goddard and Peter Jackson scored. And I just remember Anderson in that back, and he was savage. He was no messing. He was full committal. He was hard tackling, beast of a player who just didn't take any no's for an answer. And he was just one, for me, was a real first-time memory of seeing players at St James's Park in a black and white shirt. And he just really stood out to me as a great, again, another great servant with his testimonial. But, I think just a rock-solid defender.
Yeah, he's my favourite right back. I've got to be perfectly honest. He's somebody who gave 150% for the club, and in a bygone era as well, which you and I will both remember, where certain tackles would which took place back in those days would never be allowed now. You'd be red carded immediately. But Ando was part of that brigade where he'd go in at knee level, wouldn't he?
He would, yeah, exactly, yeah. And there'd be nothing thought of a 2-legged scissor challenge, on the halfway line rather than let them get through on goal. So. He was just. I think that was the difference back then. He was uncompromising. Whereas if you look at the football now, it was there was it's more playing from the back now, and defenders need to be able to play a ball and need to be able to do that kind of thing. But he was just them days it was just like if in doubt, rose head, kick it out, and then reset. So, I think some of the younger defenders we've got now could maybe learn a lot from that at times.
He had a great international career as well, didn't he? I mean, a great servant to club and country.
He did, yeah. He didn't score. He wasn't prolific for country, but again, in a green jersey, he was just somebody again of that era that was a top class defender. In sometimes what was a poor team, but obviously back then it was a far better team, unfortunately, than the team that's out there now in green. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's your right back sorted. Who's your left back?
For me, again, I went with. I looked at a lot of teams over the years, but again, I went with something that was sentimental to me. So for me, as part of the Entertainers team, I always have memories of John Beresford bombing it down from left back, bombing it down the wing, part of that Entertainers team, 95, 96. Again, we got him on the cheap. We got him in from Villa, I think it was, signed by Kevin Keegan.
From Portsmouth, yeah, from Portsmouth.
But I always remember, I can't remember what season it was, but one of the memories I had was, I think he had a bust up with Keegan and he was subbed after about 25 minutes.
That was against Villa.
Yeah, there you go. I knew Villa was in there somewhere. So I remember him having the bust up, and I think he did work his way back in the team, but I don't think he played a lot of games after that with that bust up with Keegan. So I think, again, just as that part of that team back in when, the Entertainers were flying, for me, he was what a wing back, really was. He was a great defender. He was able to cover. He'd get back on the goal line. But when he was bombing forward, and the blonde hair was in full flow, not to make you jealous there, Steve, but when the blonde hair was in full flow and he was bombing it down the wing, I think, there was no better sight when the Entertainers were in full flow.
It was always funny because people used to get them mixed up, depending on how many pints you'd had or where you were sitting in the ground. You would often get Warren Barton and John Beresford mixed up because, of course, they had matching hairdos.
Yeah, I was in the Metro Centre one midweek, and I actually bumped into John Beresford. He was in the House of Fraser, and I asked him to sign. All I had was like a till receipt from somewhere else I've been, and I asked him to sign the thing. And in fairness to him, he was shopping with his missus, and he took the time. I got a photo, got the till receipt signed, and he was just a top lad.
Yeah, top lad and a great player as well, and that's your left back. So I suppose depending on which formation that you're playing, depends on what you're going to do with centre half. So tell us what formation you're playing, and then who your first centre half is.
Yeah, I went with kind of a 4-4-2 diamond. So I've gone with two centre halves. First centre half, I've gone with Glenn Roeder. Again, he was very much one of the first memories of black and white and being in St James's that I had. And for me, he was my captain in those early stages of going to see those games. You had Roeder, you had McCreary, you had Anderson, you had like Goddard up front, Billy Whitehurst, Tony Cunningham. It was a great team. We had a really good team then. And I think Roeder just, he epitomised again. The captain he wasn't from the northeast. He was a southern lad, but he bled black and white. And I think he was just a proper legend of the club, I think. And then obviously he went on then to manage us and did a fairly half decent job. But I think just as a defender, he was just a proper club captain. A proper gentleman. So again, I went for Roeder.
Good choice, yeah. The Roeder shuffle was something which only people of a certain age will remember. But he was a great servant, and it beats that adage or that rumor, that story that goes around that that Newcastle and Cockneys don't mix. You know what I mean? Cockneys move up here, they love it. And Glenn, of course, came back as a manager as well as captain in the team. He's one of the few who's actually done that. He's captained and he's managed Newcastle United.
And I think when you look back at the fees, like we signed him. I think it was something like 125,000. We bought him for, and if you look at the games he played, and you look at even the promotion from Division 2, he was that year. He was like, I mean, that was just so much value for money for what we got from him as a servant. I think it was unbelievable back in the day. So, absolute star for me, and probably outside of Shearer, I would say probably the best black and white captain for me we've had in a long time.
Okay, so who have you got alongside Glenn Roeder?
Alongside Glenn Roeder, for me, there's only one real other central defender for me who made my top team, and that's the one and only Philly Albert. Wasn't the best defender we've ever had, but he just had an ounce of flair about him. Obviously, we bought him after Belgium played in the World Cup, which he did really well in. We signed him, 96 games, 8 goals. So again, he wasn't majorly prolific. But obviously the one you remember him for was the chip against Manchester United in the 5-0. And I think, again, he just embodied what the entertainers were about. He was a good defender. He could defend where he needed to. But he was prone to the odd mistake. So I think he was, he was no different to probably some of the defenders we've got now. But he was just iconic is probably the word I would say. And I think when he scored that chip, I think his legendary status just went up, into the stratosphere. Being on the terraces, singing the song, I think from memory now, a long time since I was at a game where he was at, but I think, did we bastardized the Rupert the Bear song, I think it was. We used to sing Philly Albert, Everyone Knows Your Name or something like that. But he was just for me, just iconic. And I think, again, just legendary status in a black and white shirt, in particular around with the entertainers and back in that season.
Great stories again, and Philip Albert had him back in the Northeast on a couple of occasions to do talk-ins, and just another man who left his heart on Tyneside. So another great selection. So who have you got sitting in front of that back four, then, Martin?
Now this will probably be slightly controversial, but I put Robbie Lee in there. Now, a few things. I wanted Rob Lee in my team, but it was where could I fit him? And the reason I put him into that, I suppose, DCM role was, I think, probably closer to his time when he finished up with Newcastle. He still had that eye for a ball, but I think the legs were kind of on the way out. But I think he's what we currently miss. But if you look at Rob Lee from when he came, I mean, we got him in 92. He was there till 2002, 10 years, another massive servant. For me, he was, for Newcastle, pound for pound, the best box-to-box midfielder we've ever had, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's hard to leave him out, isn't it? That's the problem.
It is, and I think squeezing him in at the base of that diamond formation, probably, some people will listen to this and go, "What? No way, what about Baddy? What about speed? What about," and there's 101 arguments, and I guess it's down to personal choice. But for me, I think Rob Lee was just, he was everything that you want a midfield general to be. He had a massive engine. He could score, tap-ins. He could score, belters. He could score 25, 30 yarders. And I kind of looked through some of his goals, but again, from a point of memory and things that stick with me, obviously his header in the cup final against Chelsea, was one of the best headers I've seen from him. But I think he was just, again, a quality servant to the club. And, he was integral, albeit we didn't win the league. I think he was integral to Keegan's entertainers and what that team, again, was all about. I think he just was an embodiment of the black and white shirt for me.
Yeah, I would agree, mate. I would agree. As I said, I think there'll be a few people squeezing Rob Lee in positions that possibly would be a bit strange to him, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind as long as he makes it into the 11. So who's on the right-hand side of your midfield then?
Again, I'll probably have people who will look at this and go, I don't know, it's not the right position, it's whatever. But I threw Gazza in there. So for me, Paul Gascoigne, I stuck him on the right of me diamond. Again, for me, he was the first memories of like a real good youth player coming through. So he was there, and I think he came through. Did he come through with Joe Allen? I think he did. He
did, yeah. He played in the infamous 1985 Youth Cups FA Youth Cup squad win. Yeah.
Exactly. So remember him coming through, and then I think one of the first goals I remember from him was. He did the little Gaza shuffle afterwards, but I remember seeing him hit the ball from about 20 yards out, and it went in between the staunch and the back piece of the post.
FA Cup against Crystal Palace.
and it kind of stuck in there and then rattled down to the side. But I think for Newcastle, he was our mercurial player. He had everything. He had all the talent. He had the genius, but it just didn't. Unfortunately, he didn't have the mindset at times. But I was lucky enough to have some iconic games to see him at. So I was blessed. That for me, I'm lucky to have been able to say and still be able to say I was able to go to St James's, stand in the Gallagher, and watch Gather in full flow. And I think a lot of younger supporters now that have never really seen him in a black and white shirt, obviously the older functions of us will, but he had everything. He had footwork, he had balance. He could get a ball and go through 6-7 players and slide it in underneath the keeper. And if you were 1 goal down or you were 2-1 behind, if Gaza got the ball, there was always hope. And he was just, he was as daft as a brush, but he was just a genius with the football. I was sad to see him go to Spurs, and obviously 2.5 million. If we were looking at a fee for Gaza nowadays, it'd be in the hundreds of millions. But I put him on the right. Again, I think he has to be in your team somewhere.
No, again, it's another difficult selection, but another great player and somebody who probably didn't see his best of days at Newcastle, but certainly that was where he honed his skills and his talents that made him undoubtedly the best footballer in the world in 1990. So left-hand side now, mate, please.
Left-hand side, again, I keep haunting back to the entertainers, but I went with the French flair of David Jonella. Again, man, I tell you, he was a handsome lad. But he wasn't hugely prolific, but it was just the swagger. And obviously that kit, that shirt, not only was he iconic for us with the number 14, in that shirt, entertainers. He got the ball. You just didn't know what you were going to get. The curled in shot when he turned Gary Neville, cut inside and shot past Michael in the 5-0. It puts hairs, makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Again, it was another Keegan signing, 2.5 million, I think we paid for him. It was just, Keegan had this eye for players that, he was a PSG, I think, at the time when Keegan signed him. And probably, wasn't a name that, would have come straight to the top of your hat when you were talking about players. But when he came in, I think we were so unlucky that season not to win the league. And I think he was just, alongside Shearer, and then we, Ferdinand, Beasley, he was just that front 5 or 6 players that we had, it scared teams. There are not many teams in this day and age will go and will, put 5 past Man United. And I think we were just in such a good spell. And as a Newcastle fan, it was, they're just glory days. And I think he's just one that, as part of those entertainers, he was just integral to that team. And I think without him, we weren't the same. And again, when he went off to Spurs and, we changed the managers that didn't really see him as a player, it was a huge loss for me because I think he still had lots more to offer. And obviously, he did that with Spurs, and then I think eventually went to Villa, didn't he? I think.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Great player though. Fantastic player, and nothing wrong with a bit of Gallic flair in there. I think a lot of people, look at him and look at Laurent Robert as probably the 2 best foreign imports from France, and superb players, and rightly takes a place in your star 11. So, who have you got behind the front 2?
This was an easy one for me. This was probably one of 2 of the easiest selections that I made. So top of the diamond, and with the Bobby Dazzler feet, I went with Pedro. So Peter Beardsley, for me, in both of his spells for the club, but probably more so his second spell, he was just an absolute magician. He had amazing balance, low to the ground. He could be in between 4 defenders, do 2 twists and turns, and the ball seemed to stick to him. He was unbelievable. And again, he could score from anywhere. He could round defenders. He could go past the keeper. He could hit a 25-yarder. He could get out of situations that you'd look at a player and say, how the hell did he get out of that? How did he get that goal? How did he get past the defender? How did he do that? And he was just magical. And I think some of the partnerships he had with front players and with linking up with midfielders, I don't think we've ever had a better player in a black and white shirt. For me, he would be the most iconic, and probably I would say, and I know a lot of people will run with Shearer for goal scoring feats and everything else. But for me, Peter Beardsley is my all-time hero, without a shadow of a doubt. The 84, black and white iconic kit with the blue star on, just again for me is boyhood memories of just a class player who bled black and white, who just he was just magical to watch. I just loved watching him. I loved being in a ground and seeing him get the ball and just seeing him run, in a maze and around, and it was spectacular. I think it's hard to choose a load of words to describe him because you could come up with thousands. But for me, he was my footballing hero and still is footballing icon.
Too many superlatives really to describe Peter Beardsley, and he's my hero as well. It was my all-time favourite Newcastle player, still is, for exactly the same reasons, Martin. So, good selection. So, two of the hardest decisions to make are the strikers. For Newcastle, we've had so many great ones over the years, and especially in the time that you've supported the club, so many great number nines. So, give us your number nine. Give us your first striker.
Yeah, you're right, Steve. I've been lucky to see so many, with Peacock and Kelly. For me, Paul Goddard, Sarge was always one that stood out in my mind. He was, he was probably one of the first, real strikers that I probably, I wanted the number on the back of my shirt. I love going to the ground to see him. But for me, any black and white, there's only one number 9. And of course, it has to be Alan Shearer. Shearer, outside of, just goals alone, but he was and is to this day the best striker that the Premier League has ever had. I think he's one of the best strikers that English football has ever seen. You made a point on the show earlier. We were talking, and we were saying about, Harry Kane, possibly beating Shearer's record. Sometime that day will come, but I think in the meantime, his goal scoring record in the Premiership is unrivaled, and there's a lot of arguments of great Premiership players. But for me, there is no other number 9. And I would love to have seen, and I know it'll never happen. But I think when Shearer got to that 206, unfortunately, I wasn't there for the game where he got the 201st, and he, the little flick from shoulder, and he went through and toe poked it in. To beat the record. But I would love to have seen, the number 9 shirt retired to a degree. And I know, obviously, Newcastle, there's a stature of the number 9 and being the black and white number 9, and we'll always have one. But for me, I think he'd done so many things with that shirt. He was a general. He was absolutely, a top class captain. He led from the front. He would lead you into battle if he was bloodied. He gave defenders hard times. He was a proper centre forward. And some of his goal highlights for me, his last penalty, I was there to see against Sunderland in the 4-1 win at the Stadium of Light. I saw his goal when he backed into Desai and he scored the screamer against Chelsea. The volley, I think it was Villa, when Rob Lee crossed in and Shearer volleyed it and he put it in past Schmeichel from now on the right-hand side. So many great goals, the toe pokes and all the other goals. But to quote him, to be, a sheet metal worker's son from Gosforth, he just was black and white. And the fact that he never won anything with us, I think is really, really sad, because I would have loved to have seen him fulfill his, the other part of his boyhood ambition, which would have been to lift the Premier League or lift an FA Cup. But for me, only one number 9 and will always be Alan Shearer.
Great shout, mate. Who have you got playing alongside Big Al?
Now, this was harder because there was, again, so many good centre forwards. We've had Les Ferdinand, David Kelly, Goddard. You know, you can roll them back. Mickey Quinn. You can go back even further. You know, Hughie Gallagher. Great strikers. But again, for me, it was players that were stand out to me, that meant something to me. And as such, I went with my second striker. I've gone with Andy Cole. Reason for that was I just fell in love with the guy. Signed from Bristol City for $1.5 million. 68 goals in 84 games, 81% of a strike rate. I think he was just phenomenal. The season, 41 goals in a season when we were flying, I think is just in any league, in any era, I think for a striker to hit 40 plus goals in a season is just an unbelievable feat. And he was literally Cole the goal. And he was just, he could just score. You give him the ball and he'd rack it up from anywhere. But he was just an unbelievable player for us. And probably outstanding memory for me was his goal down in Grimsby. Was it Grimsby? No. Might have been Barnsley. Can't remember. Anyway, probably wrong. Him and Beardsley, for me, when they were together, Beardsley and Cole as a partnership, I think as an outright strike force, probably along with Shearer and Ferdinand, were probably two of the best strike pairings we've ever had in black and white shirts for me. But Andy Cole, for me, just with his goal machine, absolutely gutted, devastated when Keegan came out and said he'd sold him to Man United. And I was like, what? It was, I couldn't believe it. And then obviously we done the deal, and I was a weird story. Obviously we sold Cole, and one of my mates, another lad, Newcastle sport, we were well and truly peed off. So we went to Turkey for 2 weeks on holidays, and we were sitting in Bar Street in Kusadasi, and a lad walked past me with the away, the blue away shirt that we had. It was kind of like the denim looking away one. And it had Shearer 9 on the back of it. And I did a double take and I went, what? And he went, oh, yeah. Well, we signed Shearer. And I went, no. And he went, yeah, we signed him. And I was like, couldn't believe it because we were in Turkey. We'd not heard a thing. So it was like, we were straight back out in the Lash and Bar Street then with this lad in his blue denim Newcastle top drinking all night. But it was just an unbelievable partnership. But yeah, Andy Cole for me and Beardsley, I think just that formation of great partnerships puts him just in front of some other quality Newcastle United strikers for me.
Luckily, you have a few places to fill on the substitutes bench, mate, which gives you an opportunity to put a few more club legends in and a few of your particular favourites. So who's your first substitute? Yeah,
my first sub, so goalkeeper, I went with Pav, so Pav the Geordie. Again, he just embodied Newcastle, Steve. He was just, seeing him in between the sticks, and obviously his untimely passing and stuff was absolutely a shocker to a lot of black and white fans. But he was a great goalkeeper. He wore the shirt with pride. He loved the fact of being a Geordie and hearing the fans singing for him. And again, it was a toss-up for me between Pav and Shea Given for me number 1 slot. But Given really just pushed him, I think, with the games and the service and the length in the sticks. But Pav, the Geordie, for me, absolutely had to be in my squad, without a doubt.
Okay, good stuff. Who's your next substitute?
I kind of stuck in a defender, a midfielder, and a forward, but I'm going to go with my midfielder and my forward for a few reasons. So midfielder, I did go, and I'm going to throw in Gary Speed. Speedo, for me, was probably one of the best headers of a ball I've ever seen. He had this knack of being in the box at the right time or just outside it, getting space, again, motoring from box to box, but he could get in a tackle, he could play a pass. And I was gutted when the news came out about him passing. The guy, for me, again, gets my legend and iconic status, because I think Robson. We obviously brought him in, and Robson got him playing, and again, he was an integral part of a team, and he, again, for me, just a header of the ball and a leap on him that, again, you'd see some of the goals that he used to score for us, and you just wonder again, how the hell did he get up there? How did he get to the ball? But he makes my team for two reasons. One, because of the player, and secondly, more personally, because obviously with what has happened with me in the last while, which you know about, I understand mental health probably more so now than I ever did. And, obviously when Gary did, things that happened, it's just a shame that these kind of campaigns that we do now weren't there. So I wanted to add him to the team, not only for a reason of teamsmanship and play, but also from a personal reason from me, in that losing such a legend through, mental health is just, it shocks you to the core. And, we got the campaign running. We did it on mental health, and I would just take this opportunity. I know we're talking football, but again, if people are out there, DMs are open, pick up a phone, ring someone. You are never in silence to suffer alone. There is always someone. So that's the reason I put Gary Speed in, because I get the situation where he must have been with things that have happened with me recently. So quite personal to me. You're on mute there.
I'm saying sadly missed, obviously, Gary Speed, but great sentiment from you, and great player, great man, and as you say, great shame that what happened with him. But quite right, DMs open for people, and it's a tragic story. Yeah, your final substitute then, please, Martin.
Yeah, so my final one then, I went with another forward, and again, for me, he was a terrace hero, for a couple of reasons that I put in, and the player I put in was David Kelly. So Ned Kelly, I loved that shirt first and foremost, and if I could get one for less than about 250 quid, I would love to. But he was somebody that we paid 280,000 for. Along with Peacock himself, and then obviously Cole. And I always remember Kelly and Cole in the one of his final games, the 7-1 win at home against Leicester, when both him and Cole scored the hat-trick. I think it was the first time we had worn the new Asics kit. I think it was that home game. And I remember I had the shirt, and it was an amazingly sunny day. We hit 7 past Leicester. He scored a hat-trick. Cole scored a hat-trick. But Ned Kelly, for me, was just, I think without him, we wouldn't be the club where we are today. And the reason I say that is because I was at the game where we were about to be relegated, and he scored the goal that kept us up. And I was in Filbert Street for that game. And I think had that goal not happened, had we not survived, I think there you go. There's the ticket. I think had we not got that goal, I hate to think where we would be as a club, and where we may have been. I don't think some of the joys that I would have seen maybe would have came to fruition. So for me, I put David Kelly in there because not only was he a great striker, not only was he a good partnership with Cole and in particular with Gavin Peacock. But for me, I think his goal saved the club, and for that, he deserves a place in my team.
Great stuff. Yeah, that was actually my ticket, Martin, from that day. I found it the start of lockdown when I was sorting stuff out in the loft. It's an amazing thing to still have. But yeah, it just proves that I was there that day in the East grandstand section there. Okay, then, great team, mate.
Were we at that game? Just from memory, were we lower tier or top tier? I think we were.
I was lower tier.
Yeah, we were lower tier. Yeah.
Yeah, I was lower tier, yeah. Great team selection, mate. Great team selection there. Obviously, just a quick recap. Given in goal, your back four was John Anderson, Philip Albert, Glenn Roeder, John Beresford. Just in front, we had Rob Lee. On the right-hand side, we had Gaza. On the left, we had Jonella. And then sitting behind the front two, Peter Beardsley, your favourite player, and of course, Alan Shearer and Andy Cole up front. Substitutes, as we've mentioned, Gary Speed, Pavel Cernacek and David Kelly. So, who have you got to manage this team then?
Now, this was tough. And I did cheat slightly because I went with two. And I know that's bad, but hey, look, it's Christmas and, I'm going with two and that's the end of it, so I don't care. So for me, there was only two that have meant the most to me ever as managers, and that was Kevin Keegan and Sir Bobby Robson. So Keegan, again, I don't think Newcastle would be the club that we are without him. KK, as he was back in the day, was the special one. Before Mourinho, Keegan for me was the only special one. As a player, as a guy that came. I remember being there, seeing the last game, taking off in the helicopter. But for me as a manager, he just was Newcastle. He knows what it means to be a Geordie. He knows what it means to the fans, the passion, the adrenaline, creating a team that scores more than defends more. And again, he took the club from where it was to a higher echelon. And for that, for me, I'll always be very, very grateful to Kevin Keegan for. My second manager, again, I know I cheated, but I went with Sir Bobby. And the reason for that was, I think, again, he was a local lad. He bled black and white. He was adored by the fans. He came into the club, and I remember the game against Sheffield Wednesday, 8-1. Shearer hadn't scored, and Robson came in. He got a hold of Shearer and told him, just be you. Go out there and be you. And Shearer went into that game having not scored, being on a very, very long no-scoring streak, and went out there and hit 5 goals. And to me, Bobby Robson just epitomised what he was all about. He was one of the greatest man managers I think football has ever seen. And I think, it would be grossly unfair to not have him in a position as one of our best ever all-time managers. So, yeah, I was a little sneaky and I went with the two. But you can swap them around. You can have manager and assistant manager or whichever way you want. But for me, they were the two who would be the only two for me to manage my team best 11.
Fantastic 11, Martin. Really pleased that you've agreed to do this, and what a combination in the managerial chair and dugout. Fantastic, mate. Big shout out to newworkwear.com, specialists in the supply and branding of clothing for the workplace, who sponsor our StreamYard application, and a big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, and also of our wonderful t-shirts, which you can buy from newcastlelegends.com. You can either go for the NUFC Matters t-shirt there, or you can go for the Supermac t-shirt or the mugs available, as I say, from newcastlelegends.com. And if you're out and about and you haven't got time to sit and watch us on YouTube, you can find all of our shows now on Spotify and on iTunes. And if you want to help us out and help the channel grow, please like this video, please comment on the video, and please share the video, as well as clicking the Newcastle Legends logo and subscribing to the channel, so you will get updates when our next show is available. But Martin, thanks very much, mate, for taking part, and see you soon, mate. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks, Steve. Cheers, mate. Good luck. Bye bye.
again. But it's the only.
And don't forget, throughout December, we're also asking you to think before you tweet.